This is the Brewing Fiction Podcast, where we dive deep into the world of fiction alongside its writers. In the following episode, you will hear the up close and personal journey into the worlds created by our guest author. So grab your cup and take a seat. Let's pour you a steaming cup of captivating storytelling. There's magic in every story. Let's share that magic. During today's episode, I will be enjoying coffee from the Bonavista Coffee Company. Their holiday blend I have brewed today is a medium roast from Uganda, Guatemala. By the way, their coffee is available to order online at bonavistacoffee.com. Stop by and see what they have brewing. This is the Brewing Fiction Podcast. I am your host, Keith Leonard, and welcome to the premiere episode. Today, I'm honored to have Heather Parker as my guest. Hi, Heather. Thanks for being on the show.
Hi, Keith. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. So let's jump into the segment that I would like to call Author's Corner. And this is where you get to tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay. My pen name is H.R. Parker. If you read my stories on Medium, you'll see my stories are under the name H.R. Parker. But all my friends call me Heather. I live in Georgia, really close to Florida. So I love the beach, the warm weather, being outside, all of that. I've been writing for most of my life. I love animals and music. I love films.
Well, you know what? On that note, when you talk of music, and I know this is all about writing, but I was doing a little bit of research and reading some of your background, and I had to ask you about one of your stories, Cyber Stalker. You said it was released as a song.
Yes, it was released as a song. On Instagram, I am friends with an artist. He first was called Overnight Waves. Now he's called Alien Pyre. He's like an 80s metal synthwave musician, really cool guy. He lives in Ireland, but he's Brazilian. But anyway, so he was following me too, and he liked the little stories I would post on Instagram. I would find some cool artwork, post that, and then write a story based on that artwork. And he reached out to me one day. We had never talked before. He said he loved that story and wondered if he could turn it into a song.
Wow.
So he did. He made two versions, one instrumental and one with words that he, had to morph into lyrics that worked better.
Of course, yeah.
Overall it was the same story. But yeah, it was really cool. Very cool experience. And we have some merchandise with Cyber Stalker artwork on there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to put some links on the podcast homepage, and anybody who's listening may look into that. I'm an 80s fan. I actually watched the video on YouTube there about an hour or so ago, and it was quite catchy. I'm like, wow. So I'm going to be talking to the writer of the lyrics to this song. That's pretty cool.
Yes, thanks.
So how long ago was this? How far into your writing career were you when they picked that up?
A few years.
Okay.
But I had only started posting flash fiction. That was kind of a new thing for me at that time. So I was happy to get, all this positive feedback on my fiction because I was known as a poet. I had published two chapbooks with two like independent presses, and they were like limited edition, handmade books. It was, really cool.
Yeah.
And then I just I needed a new challenge, I felt like. So I started to study flash fiction and started to write it and then started to publish it.
Wow.
Started out with like really small independent presses
Yeah.
getting published in those. And then a colleague of mine mentioned Medium again. I had been on there before years
Okay.
ago, publishing poetry and articles, but he recommended I do it for my fiction, and I'm so glad I did.
Yeah. Well, and look at that. That's how we come to be here today, is just through Medium. You seem to have quite a history with your writing, and I hope that you can share as we get into some questions and that kind of stuff here. You'll share your
Yeah,
journey, and
of
maybe
course.
some listeners may get inspiration there.
Mhm.
I'm going to throw out 5 word pairs here, and
Okay.
just to get to know you as a person, as a writer, just have a little bit of fun. And I just want you to pick one. So I call this Fast Five. Here we go. Ebook or paperback,
Paperback,
iOS or Android,
iOS.
beach getaway or mountain retreat.
I love both, but I have to say beach.
Nice. Science fiction or fantasy.
Uh, I cannot pick, honestly. I love
No,
them both so
I know.
much.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh. I
that's
guess I
fair.
would have to say science fiction.
Okay. And cat or dog?
Dog.
Dog. Okay. Do you have a dog?
I do. I have an English Springer Spaniel named Jake.
Nice.
Yeah, our we had another dog. She passed in December.
Okay.
She was really old, so she had
Mm,
had a long, great life,
nice.
but she had cancer, and you know,
Mm, yeah, sad.
it was one of those awful decisions that we had to make. But you
Probably
know,
one of the hardest ones. What the hardest you have to do with an animal for
yeah,
sure. Well, on to something a little more happy. But is Jake in the house with you? Are we going to hear him bark, or is he outside?
oh, I don't know. He might. I think he's inside. I'm not
Yeah,
sure. I'm sort of holed away
fair.
um, to hopefully block out any noise.
Yeah.
Because he is a barker for sure.
Well, I've
Barks at
already heard.
everything.
Yeah, I've already heard one of my cats meowing behind me, so it's all good. All right. Well, let's go through a few questions here and let's get to know a little bit more about you and share something with our listeners that they can probably take away to help them if they're on the writing journey that you and I are on, or if they're just fans of fiction and want something else to dive into. If I may, I'm going to ask, how did your writing journey begin? Like you said you started really young, right?
Yeah, I was always a voracious reader. I got that from my dad. When we would just devour books, and that's
Hmm.
also where my love of fantasy and science fiction comes from, was my
Wow.
dad. But I guess it all started because I was like, I can create my own worlds just like in these books. And I had so many ideas, so I just started to write them down. So I did start with fiction. I wrote a lot of paranormal, supernatural type stuff. I
Right.
was really into vampires at the time.
One of my favorite.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Um, and then I really got into poetry when I was around 12, I guess. I started writing a lot of poetry. And when I was 14 at school, we had to do a poetry project
Yeah.
for, English class.
Okay.
And my teacher wrote on there that I had a true poet's soul. And I was like
Wow.
14. And
14.
that was, yeah, and that is what made me say, you know what? I think I can actually do this. And
Wow.
I have never stopped writing.
Yeah. That teacher of yours, does he or she know the inspiration that they gave you?
Um, I don't think so. They passed away
Oh, okay.
years ago from
Hmm.
cancer, sadly. But
Hmm.
I would love for her to know that. Really kind of pushed me, I think, made me believe in my own writing more. I guess because I finally had someone from the outside giving me a critique, because besides my parents, you
Right. Yeah.
know.
It's great to have your family behind you, but yeah, it's nice to
Yeah,
hear
yeah.
from someone else, right?
Hmm.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, that's fantastic. That's great to hear. We're just going to be a small podcast, but you know what? What if somebody hears your story or hears something we talk about today, and they're inspired enough to write down their words the first time, and then somebody can say, love your poetry. A poet's soul.
Mhm.
I'm not a poet. I am not even close. So, uh, but good for you. So you're doing more fiction now, right? I guess we'll just talk a brief bit about Medium. I did kind of want to throw that into a segment a little later. Medium seems to be for short fiction, microfiction. I've been dabbling with Drabble here for the last
Mhm.
month or so, and really enjoying that. But do you have anything longer? A long fiction, a novel in the making?
I actually have something written,
Oh, okay,
that has been marinating.
yeah,
So I guess it was over a year ago. I was a writer for Mithril Fiction,
okay,
which is it's an app for serial fiction, only speculative fiction.
okay,
And you have to submit and be accepted. It's not like an open platform. So anyway, I wrote for them for I guess about a year. And I wrote a story called The Revenant Hunters,
right,
and I think it's now around 90,000 words. It got good feedback on there. It was one of the most commented stories of all time on the platform, meaning I had the most comments on my story
right.
than a lot of the other ones. So that was really great to have that audience to, go back and forth with and talk to about my story,
Nice.
and know what they wanted to read next and what excited them and all of that kind of stuff. So anyway, The Revenant Hunters is a story about it's like a steampunk gas lamp fantasy type story
Okay.
about a young woman who has the power to usher the dead um, to the afterlife. And she can see spirits, and this one really evil spirit sort of latches onto her and feeds off of her energy. And the only way he can come back and his minions can come back is if they inhabit the bodies of dead people, which is a revenant. That's what a revenant is.
Okay.
And so she teams up with some other people who have their own powers. It's so much to get into right now. It'll take me
Absolutely.
forever.
No worries.
And so they all have to go after this evil guy and all of his revenant hordes that go and kill people and do all these horrible things.
So you release that in short segments on the
Yeah,
app
it
then?
was on the app. It was twice a week. Each episode, the max it could be was 1,500 words.
Okay.
So that did help me learn brevity. Okay, like I have to get this done in this amount of words this week, you know, to
Right.
propel this forward. Um, and it was good to have deadlines and work with editors, and it's a good experience. But I did pull it because they did have exclusive rights, and I was ready to get it ready to be a novel.
Wow.
So
Oh,
I let that sit and marinate for a while, and I'm about to dive back into it to
wow.
start the first round of edits.
Well, looking
Ooh,
forward to that for sure. And good for you. So that's your that will be your first novel then?
yes,
Okay. Well, there you have it.
yes.
Somebody will be watching for that. I'm sure I know I will.
Thank
Oh,
you.
yeah, you betcha. If I could ask, how many hours a week do you write now? And
Wow.
obviously, I know
Mm.
this week is going to be different than last, but do you have an average? Do you have a goal? Are you one of those people who, have that need so many hours per week?
No, I really don't do that to myself because I have to go with how I'm feeling each day, and I
Right.
don't like to force myself to write when I'm not up for it. I do try to write at least 2 hours 5 days a week. I like to write Monday through Friday.
Oh,
I
wow.
started looking at it like my job,
Mm,
and when I started to do that, that really changed a lot,
okay.
to help me get into, like, a better routine. But if I don't get to write one day, or if I'm just too tired or whatever, I don't beat myself up for it either. Sometimes I'll just do something like it's writing related, but not actually writing, like maybe doing a mood board for a story on Pinterest, or doing some more research on whatever crazy thing I'm writing about,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Wow. Okay, that's great advice because I have been, shall I say, seriously writing for about a year. I had a lot of
Mhm.
ideas scribbled and so on and so forth. I'll say writing for about a year, and January wasn't feeling well for a couple of weeks. I think I stressed myself out because I didn't sit and write for, I think it was 5 or 6 days in a row, and I was starting to stress
Yeah.
out about it. So that's really good advice not to do that to yourself.
Yeah. I and, I think a lot of writers read this advice online that you have to write every day, and I don't agree with that. But if you do agree with that, that's great too, whatever
Sure,
works for you. That's
absolutely.
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm just not one of those people,
Okay. Yeah.
And, too, I do have chronic illnesses, and I do have to go, like I said, I have to go by how I feel each day, and I
Sure.
can't push myself too hard. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Do what do you do what works for you, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And if you can only write, 10 minutes a day, that's something. That's
Yeah.
better than nothing if that's all you can do.
For
That's
sure.
great.
Yeah. And you know what? I mean, for me, like it's a hobby for me. I'm not out to become a Stephen King or anybody else. I do it as a pastime. My kids are
Mhm.
adults now, and you know what? You find you have extra time, and my wife is
Right.
saying, "You need to find a hobby. You need to find a hobby." So it just so happened that my hobby has turned into writing, and I
That's really cool.
it is, yeah, it is cool. Do you have a particular time of day you like to write? I know you say Monday to Friday, but do you have a specific time of day? Are you an early writer, a late writer, or again, just 100% when and how you feel?
Usually afternoons. It's always when I dedicate time to write. I do work part-time,
Right,
um, so I like to get all of that work done, and then the afternoons, I can focus just on my writing and not have anything hanging over my head,
right,
you know? Um,
for sure.
and that's when I have the most energy, would be like mid-morning to early afternoon
Okay.
is like the best time to write for me.
Yeah, I'm most energized early in the morning.
Mhm,
Um, I do work full time Monday to Friday, so I will do a little bit of scribbling, we'll say, in the evenings throughout the week, but my
mhm.
prime time is early Saturday and early Sunday mornings myself.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
for sure.
weekend warrior.
That for sure. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. You have to squeeze it in
you squeeze
whenever
it
you
in.
can.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
for sure. Awesome. Okay. Do you have a writer's kryptonite? Do you feel you have anything that you can describe as your kryptonite?
Like a weakness, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I always have so many things I want to work on, and I tend to sort of jump from thing to thing. Um, when I was writing The Revenant Hunters, I was very just laser focused on that. But now that I'm just writing fiction, and I can publish at my own pace,
Hmm.
um, I just sort of jump from thing to thing. There's so many shiny things that attract my attention, and I think that's one of my weaknesses.
Right. Yeah.
Because I have
I,
all these unfinished stories that I've got to get back to.
well, you know what? I did have that question. How many active stories do you have on your computer or in your notebook or however? Well,
Oh my
how do you
god.
write? Are you a computer writer? Are you pen and paper
Yes, I am a computer writer,
computer?
but I did read this very interesting article on Medium, and I need to go back and find it so we can link this. But it was about how handwriting, it activates both sides of your brain, which,
Oh,
as a teacher, I knew that part, but it
yeah.
activates both sides of your brain. That's why you remember better when you take notes by hand,
Oh, okay.
instead of typing. So if you handwrite, you're a lot more connected to your own story. So every now and then I will sit down and write drabbles in a notebook by hand. And so then when I'm transcribing it, that's also a good way to edit because you're going word by word, sentence by sentence, typing it in, and it's fun and it's different and you know a little challenge because nobody handwrites anymore.
No, that is so true, right? I mean, I can't even write cursive anymore. The most I do now is sign my name. Right? I probably grew up writing in school. We had
Writing, right.
classes, right? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah,
now
and even then, our essays had to be typed and all of
right,
that, but, like, just writing a drabble, my hand will get tired.
right.
Just writing a little story, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is crazy." And I
So
think about the writers who always wrote with a pen, like, how long that takes to write a
right.
whole novel by
So true.
hand and have to edit it by hand.
Yeah.
Wow, we have it so easy.
Don't we? Everybody should be a writer now.
Yeah.
Do you do research before you ever write, or do you just let words fly and research later?
Sometimes it depends. Sometimes I'm so excited to get started on the story, I just jump in and I just have to start writing.
Yeah, yeah,
And I might have a scene already in my head that I want to get down. Other times, like with the Revenant Hunters, for instance, I did do a lot more research before I actually started to write, like on types of ghosts, all of the different types of like I guess lore that goes around revenants, the idea of a revenant, things like that. And there's so many other components to that story. So I had a lot to research, and I enjoy that. I really enjoy research. I know that's nerdy, but I do. I love that part.
yeah. You know what? I do more now than say even when I started a year ago. Just because not so much that you're looking for ideas, but to give body to your story. I think it's
Right.
part of what we need to do.
Yeah, and it can lend some authenticity to your story.
Yeah.
Especially if you're writing science fiction. I find that I research a lot more when I write science fiction, just because readers expect some level of, I don't know,
Yeah.
scientific fact. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know.
No, you're right.
Um, but that's one great thing about fantasy, though, is you can dive in and like nothing is wrong. You can do whatever. The sky is the limit.
It's true. Your world. I mean, I kind of view fiction that way, but I can see what you mean. I
Yeah,
have read some science fiction, and I can see how it would be required of a writer to have that knowledge, or at least seem
at
like they
least
have it.
know some. Yeah, at least to
Yeah.
know some terms and
Yeah.
like, if you're writing cyberpunk, hey, what's another cool word for a gun or a blaster?
Join us next week for the second part of the conversation with H.R. Parker. In the meantime, you can find links to her work in the description. Stop by the podcast homepage to see what else is brewing on the Brewing Fiction podcast. You can find the link in the description. And don't forget to click the subscribe button to be notified whenever a new episode is released.